Thanks, everybody, on such short notice. If you know the history of this National Defense Authorization Act, it passed in the House in May. There was little or no discussion over the summer. Maybe a couple people knew about this, but very few. Then in December 1st is really when the very first media had a paragraph or two that the Senate had voted 93 to 7 to pass this. And that's when I saw it and I said, oh my gosh. I wrote a Huffington Post that weekend. And then as the last couple of weeks have gone on, the New York Times has come out. There's 4 generals that wrote a great op-ed. 4-star generals, I mean, 2 4-star generals wrote a great op-ed. So there has been some information out, but it's been deliberately made confusing for the public. Lots and lots of people will say, but it doesn't apply to American citizens. Or they called their congressperson, and their congressperson told them, but don't worry, it only applies to the terrorists, it only applies to the Afghans or the 9/11 or whatever they're saying. They were deliberately misleading. So, in fact, what happened is that it passed quickly in the Senate. It went back to a conference committee. Yesterday it passed in the House. And somebody who's been following the news maybe knows more than I do, but I have just heard it passed in the Senate. And it passed in the Senate not by the 93-7. It went down to 86-13, and one abstaining, I think. So, and our Senator Franken did have a change of heart and voted against it. I'll just give some kudos to my husband today, and he doesn't usually like to make the calls, but he did, and he got a brilliant line. He said, you know, I sat through all those bean feeds in 2006 and 2007 when you were speaking and talking about doing the, you know, putting on the shoes of Paul Wellstone and that you would fill the seat of Paul Wellstone. And he said, for once, please consider what Paul Wellstone would do. And so I thought that was a very good remark, and for a lot of different reasons he voted against it. So we don't have our ACLU attorney tonight, and hopefully she will be coming in. I'm sure she's got a lot of work to do, and I wanted her to kind of give a legal overview. But while we're waiting for her, I will just mention what I think the 3 worst things are about this bill. And these are, if you read Glenn Greenwald, who's really the best, probably one of the best writers, but there's also a Mother Jones writer, Adam Server, and there's another guy who's writing for, oh my gosh, I forget his name now. There's a third guy, Christian Monitor, I think it is, and he's doing a great job of writing accurately about this. But the 3 things are, it delinks the justification for the authorization to use military force from what it was in October 2001, where you actually had to show a connection to the 9/11 attackers. So you factually were supposed to show that it was connected to the 9/11 attacks. Now that has been really broadened and delinked to the point where now you just have to, the new wording says associated forces and significant support. And so for those people who are staying afterwards to listen to the report back from the Minnesota Committee to Stop FBI Repression and how this, what is seen as material support for terrorism, to include humanitarian support, to include advocacy, all these things that nobody would have ever believed had anything to do with terrorism. The Humanitarian Law Project is a case where they're trying to do conflict resolution, non-peaceful conflict resolution, and they were declared to be material supporters of terrorism because they were trying to teach peaceful conflict resolution. So that's the problem here, and so it's delinked from 9/11. For those of us who wanted to see torture and Guantanamo closed, for all of the people out there who voted in 2008 believing that if there was one promise that Obama was stating clearly, you know, a lot of things were a little bit waffly and whatever, but there was one promise that was stated clearly, which was this intent to close Guantanamo. Well, Congress is saying that Guantanamo stays open. And we are saying that anyone who is accused of terrorism will be handled by the military and will not get a civilian trial. The one reason why Obama apparently was saying he would veto this was not because of upholding civil liberties and Bill of Rights. It was because this would actually have curtailed his power and his discretion. And if you remember the John Yoo theory of presidential war powers, it's that in a time of war, emergency, that the president gets to decide these things without really Congress or judiciary. So you've seen all these outcomes from the notion that the president is prosecuting the war. So a permanent war, a permanent Guantanamo, and then this worst thing perhaps from the American citizen standpoint, which is that the Article 3 right to a trial in the Constitution looks like it went up in smoke. Anyone read my letter to the editor today? This is think about, the Paul Harvey side of this. It's so sad that if we didn't have Jon Stewart satirizing this, we'd all be like scared out of our minds and crying. But if you think about what Paul Harvey would say 220 years ago today. Now, this is really something. 220 years ago, exactly today, they ratified the Bill of Rights. That is incredible. And you look at the founding fathers, Madison, and they really understood that human rights and civil liberties were so important. And now, some of us just came from a meeting with Klobuchar's staffer. We're asking, what in the heck can be going on in somebody who went to law school, who was supposed to know the Constitution, Obama, a constitutional law lawyer, and no understanding of these fundamental right to a trial, right to due process, right to an attorney, First Amendment rights of assembly, freedom of speech, and I will say, I see Aaron in the crowd, our Eighth Amendment right to be free of cruel and inhumane punishment. I mean, these are so fundamental. They're not liberal. They're not progressive. These are just fundamental, pragmatic. That's why we have the four-star generals saying that this is really, really wrong. I see that we have our main speaker here, and I'm going to let Teresa, talk a little bit. And what we want to do is leave enough time. Teresa is going to give a legal overview of what happened today and what this means. Then after that, I hope people are thinking, because I want to see some speak out. We are taping this. It's being live streamed right now. So we want people to speak out. We are going to. Is there anybody here from one of the 10 congresspersons? I got 4 RSVPs that they weren't coming. But is there a staffer in the room? We have a message. Oh, good. We do have a message from one. So Bob will read that. We have a message from Ellison's office. But we are going to take this to them afterwards as a video, or we're going to email them. So we want everybody to speak out afterwards, but be brainstorming on what we can do, where we can go from here, and what we can do now to try to finally, finally get the message out, make them see that this is going to harm our whole country in many different ways. But Teresa I met Teresa, gosh, I got to just give you a brief bio, and this is going to be a very selfish one. When the Burnsville police were telling us that honk for peace was illegal because there's a law on the books that honking, improper honking, the Minnesota improper honking law from the 1800s or something. And then we did our research and found out the Burnsville police had never, ever arrested anyone for improper honking until we happened to have our signs, honk for peace. And then Teresa also, when we had our banners on the footbridges and the state troopers seized our banners, said, you can't be up there. We'll let you have the American flag. We leave that there, but your support the troops and the war and all your rest, we're seizing them. And twice now, the ACLU was able to really support and vindicate. This is twice. I'm just very selfish here because I'm talking about these kind of mini things. The ACLU has been on the forefront of getting through FOIAs, a lot of this terrible, terrible stuff that's going on right now. So at least we have an idea. Teresa Nelson.
Thank you for that great introduction, Coleen. Sorry that I was a little late. Traffic was pretty crazy. But it is Bill of Rights Day, and so I brought Bill of Rights on a stick. So I'll put these on the front table. Help yourself. So you can take it anywhere. So, you know, we are incredibly troubled by this National Defense Authorization Act. It is just a fundamentally anathema to our Bill of Rights. And it enshrines in law things that we never would have imagined would happen in this country, even after 9/11. This is just so odious and so offensive to civil liberties, to our notions of human rights, to our notions of fairness and constitutional rights. As it was originally written in the House, the bill would have specifically required that when you have a terrorism suspect, either on American soil or anywhere in the world, it would have required the Bush administration, or the Obama administration, to take them into military custody. And as Coleen said, this was criticized by the Obama administration, not because military custody violates fundamental human rights, fundamental constitutional rights, but rather because it constrained his authority and his flexibility and ability to use various powers to deal with terrorism. Now, another interesting criticism, which I think is important for people to note, in addition to this, taking away flexibility, is that by taking away that flexibility, it also actually harms national security. The FBI wrote about how being forced to turn people over to military custody automatically would interfere with their ability to do anti-terrorism investigations. It would interfere with their ability to make deals with people, to pressure them through interrogation, to provide information about others. It would hamper their work. It would harm their work. And yet Congress was intent on requiring this military custody, mandatory military custody. So I'm going to go into a little bit more specifics about what the law says. So Section 1031, or what the bill says, it hasn't been signed into law yet. Section 1031 goes into further detail about the authority to take people into custody, take people into indefinite detention, and then treat them pursuant to military law or the law of war. So a person who planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks of 9/11 doesn't really define what aided means, as we know with regard to other, the material support of terrorism and the Humanitarian Law Project lawsuit. That could mean providing humanitarian aid to people who are affiliated with Al-Qaeda at that time. Or it also allows the custody of a person who was part of or substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and here's the kicker though, or associated forces that are engaged in hostilities against the United States. Now, it doesn't define what associated forces are, and this could include groups that don't even exist right now, groups that certainly didn't exist during 9/11. Al-Shabaab wasn't around when 9/11 happened. Other groups, there's no definition of what is an associated force. So let's say we have a new group of people who decide they like what Al-Qaeda stands for. Are they an associated force? Well, probably. It's really up to the president's discretion what that means. And that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners. including any person who has committed a belligerent act or has directly supported such hostilities in aid of such enemy forces. So again, this aid, given the broad definition of material support that currently exists in law and that the U.S. Supreme Court has approved, providing aid could include humanitarian aid, could include, we were talking about it this afternoon, Al-Shabaab has a Twitter account now. If somebody retweets something that Al-Shabaab tweeted, is that person aiding Al-Qaeda? Is that person now at risk for military detention? How about Twitter too? That's a good point. I don't know. That would be, one would think that would be aiding them to disseminate their message. That's a very good point. So it's incredibly broad, and it broadens the president's power to detain, and essentially gives him a pass on the Bill of Rights. And if you look at that Bill of Rights on a stick, you'll see the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, both provide rights to have due process before you're deprived of life or liberty, the right to a fair trial in a criminal proceeding, the right to an attorney, all of those things that this new bill would take away. Another portion of Section 1031 does say, nothing in this section shall be construed to affect existing law or authorities relating to the detention of United States citizens, lawful resident aliens, or any other persons who are captured or arrested in the United States. So that, again, that gives the Bush administration some flexibility, or the Bush administration, I'm sorry, so many years of talking about the Bush administration, and this is something that you would expect in his administration. It gives the Obama administration flexibility to use the criminal justice system in certain circumstances if we're talking about American soil. But don't be confused, make no mistake about it, this law does allow for the indefinite military detention of American citizens who are taken into custody on American soil. And this is something different from anything that we've had in the past. And you don't have to take my word for it. Lindsey Graham, when he was speaking in support of it, I'll see if I can find the quote here, said about Section 1031, the statement of authority to detain does apply to American citizens, and it designates the world as the battlefield, including the homeland. So what he's saying is it includes American citizens who can be taken into custody. It includes American soil, the homeland, as part of this worldwide battlefield that we now apparently have. The original, as I said, the original language would have required military detention. The Obama administration cried foul, saying it would interfere with their flexibility. Senator Feinstein offered a compromise amendment that included that language that I just read, that nothing in this section shall be construed to affect existing law or authorities relating to the detention of U.S. citizens, lawful resident aliens of the United States, or of any other persons who are captured or arrested in the U.S. All that does, though, is gives the the Obama administration flexibility, so they can. Yeah, I do. The Bush-Obama administration. Yeah. So it gives them the flexibility. They can decide indefinite military detention or ordinary criminal proceedings using constitutional rights and liberties for the individual. Once they added that language that gave the Obama administration flexibility, the Obama administration signaled that they would not veto this bill. So we had been, up until yesterday, hoping that he would veto it and that we could get Congress to not override that veto. Once that language was added, giving him that flexibility, he said, okay, that's fine. So in essence, he's okay with having the authority to use military detention, indefinite military detention of individuals, including American citizens who are taken into custody on U.S. soil. Very frightening, very frustrating, very disappointing. A couple of other points about the legislation that are also troubling include dealing with Guantanamo. One section of the bill would restrict the ability of the military to transfer people from Guantanamo to their home countries. They would essentially have to get Congress's approval to do that. So Guantanamo's not going to be closed anytime soon. And then the other one prohibits transferring Guantanamo detainees into the United States, and also prohibits using federal money to renovate federal facilities for detaining those Guantanamo detainees in the United States. The Obama administration had flirted with the idea of bringing them to the U.S., trying them in civilian courts, creating a detention system within the United States using existing federal prisons. Both of those things are now foreclosed by this bill. So that's also a very troubling turn of events. So this afternoon, the changes to the bill, the conference committee bill, was passed by the Senate. Senator Franken voted against it. Yay! Senator Klobuchar voted for it. Senator Klobuchar voted for it. This is particularly troubling for a few reasons. Number one, it militarizes national security. It militarizes counterterrorism efforts. And we know from our past experiences that that's not necessarily going to make it better. The United States and the Department of Justice have successfully identified, prosecuted, and convicted individuals for acts of terrorism through our criminal justice system, using our Constitution. And so there's no reason to think that the military is going to do a better job. In fact, it's very possible that they're going to do a much worse job when you look at their history at Guantanamo, when you look at when you're in the middle of hostilities, people can be swept up. It's not, there's no reason to think that military tribunals are going to do any better dealing with terrorism than our criminal justice system. Second, it diminishes our stature in the world. We are a beacon of liberty, and we are, we're dismantling that liberty on our own. With bills like this. We are saying, yes, we have this wonderful Bill of Rights that we're celebrating today, but we're going to take a scissors and just cut out the Sixth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment, and we're only going to apply those when we want to. And if our founders had thought, these rights really should only apply when we want them to apply, what's the point of having the Bill of Rights? It's only meaningful when it applies in those situations when we're most tempted to violate those rights. Same with the First Amendment. I say that all the time. If we're only interested in protecting speech that everybody agrees with, what's the point of a First Amendment? We don't need it. We need it when it's on the fringes. We need it when the majority is tempted to silence people. Same with the Fifth Amendment, same with the Sixth Amendment. We need it when the majority of us have a visceral reaction to people and want to lock them up and throw away the key without due process. That's why we have our Constitution, to protect from that tyranny of the majority. So we, this beacon of freedom, the United States, we're just getting rid of that. We're dismantling it on our own. There's probably some other countries out there that don't necessarily want us to assume this power for ourselves. This law, or this bill, talks about the battlefield, which is the world. So our endless war on Al-Qaeda and war on terror has no temporal boundaries, and it has no physical boundaries. It's unlike any other war that we have ever fought, and it's how would we react if Great Britain said, we're going to come and take somebody that we suspect of being a member of the IRA, who's an American citizen and who's lived here all his life. If we're going to, we're just going to come and take that person and turn them into military custody, where they will be held indefinitely without any rights. I think we'd have something to say about that. I hope we would. I hope the United States would have something to say about that, but maybe not. But there are other countries out there that might be a little bit concerned if we go and identify somebody as a suspect, a terrorism suspect, that we're going to mark for indefinite detention. So that's a problem as well. So let's see. I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to talk about. Again, this notion of what the bill says is that this person will be detained until the end of hostilities. And unlike World War I, where you have an armistice day, November 11th, unlike World War II, where you have treaties that are signed and the war ends, this is not, it's impossible to define what the end of hostilities even looks like when it comes to a war on terrorism, or even a war on Al Qaeda and its affiliates. We don't know who those affiliates are. We don't know if 10 years from now a new group crops up that is somebody who used to be with Al Qaeda who now has created this new group. We just have no idea. It's open-ended, and there's no. It will always be perpetuated. We can always, there always has been terrorism. There always will be terrorism. It's an unfortunate situation. Nobody likes terrorism, but it exists, and this just is an open-ended suspension of our Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. So I would be where things stand right now. Then is that the bill has been passed by both houses. It's gone to conference committee and now been affirmed again with the new amendments, the compromise amendments. Obama has signaled that he will sign it, but he has not signed it yet. So the ACLU does have an action alert, and you have the opportunity to go to their website, sign a thing urging President Obama to veto the legislation. Last-ditch effort. I don't know when he's planning on signing it, but there is still time to try and get him to agree to veto the legislation. Given that, his criticism of the bill never really talked about the Constitution, I'm not real hopeful that we will get him to change, but it's not over until he signs it. So I'd be.
Can we stay for a little while?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. I want Larry. We'll hold questions just for a second. She's going to stay because Larry has to get over there, and he's going to read a statement from the Vets for Peace, a resolution, and then I want Bob to read a statement from Ellison, and then we'll open it up for questions. And Steve, everybody.
Fortunately and unfortunately, I run a program on Thursday nights in the other room down the hallway, so I have to get over there. And besides, Lynn the Clown is there tonight. It's a program for adults who struggle with mental illness, and Lynn is one of the compassionate rebels in Bert Berlow's second book, Lynn Hilschel. Veterans for Peace. Well, yeah, and here's the other problem. We were on a terrorist watch list during the Bush administration, and I don't know how we went off, but if I were to be detained because I hang out with the anti-war committee, those folks across the hallway would be really upset. I mean, they like me, and they'd probably revolt, which might be a good thing under the circumstances. Here's the resolution that we passed on Sunday night at our meeting. It was a quick meeting because we had a party, and I'll try to fix the language here out loud, and then maybe we can fix it to make it more smooth. But the resolution is intact. Whereas the United States government was founded on the principle of people to freely govern themselves, and whereas the people of the United States have a laudable history of humanitarian aid and political support for people being oppressed, and whereas these principles and actions imply that the exercise of these rights and actions can be performed by civilians in compliance with existing civil laws without the interference of the military, and that these rights and actions are being threatened by the current National Defense Authorization Act passed by the United States Senate 93-7. Therefore, be it resolved that Veterans for Peace, Chapter 27, goes on record opposing the passage of this act, voted for by both Senator Franken and Klobuchar, and we know that on the second rewrite, Senator Franken voted against. And to alert people of the inherent dangers in this act and to work with other organizations to preserve our freedoms and our political rights. In view of the Vets for Peace statement of purpose and history of actions to live out this commitment to nonviolence and peace, it is important that the Veterans for Peace take a lead in this effort. December 11th, 2011. Thank you.
And McCollum and Ellison were the only two of the 10 who originally voted against this. And we have a statement, I think, from Ellison's office.
Yeah, and you should probably know that we did make some effort to communicate with his office, recognizing the fact and praising him for his past votes against this. So I think they're a little more receptive to issuing this statement. But I just got this just before I left home tonight from Mike Siebenaler, who's an aide to Congressman Keith Ellison. And it says Ellison's statement on the NDAA. House and Senate negotiators made some improvements to the defense authorization bill brought to the House floor today. They delegated language that would have mandated military detention for American citizens suspected of terrorism, an obvious violation of their constitutional rights. The revised bill also gives more flexibility to the executive branch so that law enforcement can do its job. I guess I already been mentioned. I appreciate these changes, but still find other provisions problematic. Everyone, from the ACLU to the FBI, has expressed concern about the bill. I do not think we should be codifying post-9/11 security measures that threaten our civil liberties and reinforce a mentality of constant war. By preventing the military from transferring detainees to U.S. prisons, the bill essentially ensures that Guantanamo Bay will never be closed. This is unacceptable and continues to harm our national security. The bill also authorizes the continued funding of the war in Afghanistan. Parenthetically, as I understand, $666 billion was approved, I guess, on that, which I adamantly oppose. That war, the longest in U.S. history, has cost thousands of American lives, untold Afghan civilian deaths, and hundreds of billions of dollars. As an original co-sponsor of the Responsible End to the War in Afghanistan Act, I believe the only defense money we spend on Afghanistan should be for the safe and orderly withdrawal of U.S. troops. And I will continue to do all I can to support members of the military and their families, but I could not support the bill for these reasons. Yay!
obviously, there's plenty of blame to go around in terms of it. We all like to point to the politicians. They are down to 8% now. The poll 7, and it's just a drop here. I understand that in the Soviet Union, when they only had one communist party, they had a higher approval rating than they do now. I mean, this is pretty, scary stuff if you have a government and it's seen as so, corrupted or whatever, that they are down to this low a percent. But also, I have to say, we have to all blame ourselves here. There is not enough public pressure on the politicians. The reason they think they can get away with this is they think their big money will buy TV ads, and they don't think that they have to listen to people. So it all comes back to us. There aren't that many brave people making these calls and protesting in front of their offices and that type of thing. So let's think more about brainstorming of where we can go from here. Our Tackling Torture at the top group has a couple of ideas, and we'll call up Susan here to tell you a couple of things. But before that, I want to give people a chance who have to leave early to speak out. Honestly, this is a speak out for everybody. Let's do the Occupy stuff and let everybody be a democracy. And so if you have a question about the bill, if you want to, just speak out your mind. I'm going to call up Mr. Andrig first because he has to leave early, but then I'll be the moderator. But let's get everybody up. And again, we're going to make a video out of this to get feedback to the Congress.
I'll be fast. I want to make really 2 points. One involves the groups that are here, and the other involves the deep politics of the problem that we're facing. Many of you know each other. I want to acknowledge the Veterans for Peace in particular. A couple have already spoken, but you all have been so very steadfast in stepping up when the time's called for it. WHAM is heavily represented here, and the Tackling Torture from the Top group is one. We all know WHAM. WHAM and Veterans for Peace have done a lot. We have the Anti-War Committee and some of the individuals who are personally at risk, and Jess and Sarah, who are personally at risk of being prosecuted for speaking on behalf of some war-related situation. So it's not theoretical, is my point. It's past the point of theory to where real human beings that we know are at real risk of serious consequences for exercising rights that we all grew up cherishing. All right. There's many others, so I want to move fast. Thank you for everybody who is working on this. Now, on the deep politics side, actually, I do want to mention, there's an awful lot of Minnesotans for 9/11 Truth here, at least 10 of them. A group that is often ignored. They know something very important about this problem, and that's the best segue for me. Our adversaries know exactly what they're doing. This is not an accident. Congress doesn't make an act at 93-7 unless some very powerful forces have put a lot of effort into making sure that vote goes the way they want it to go. But in between us and them, there's just a huge number of sincere, well-meaning people, troops in the military, cops on the street, that really don't think of themselves or ever want to be out shredding the Constitution, and yet they find themselves in positions where that's what their orders are, and they need their job too. And I just want to remind you all, there's such experience in the room, you know these things already, that there's a lot of people who've been told this is the right way to go. I'm sure Amy Klobuchar would say, I'm an attorney. I swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, just like these others, and yet somehow she's putting her power behind this terrible thing. All right, that's just to take one example. So, here's my last point. The really evil people who spend just as much time all day, they work as hard as they can, and they put their resources into destroying our republic. They don't think they're destroying our republic. They think they're protecting our republic, and they are, in a way, insane. But need to be dealt with because they mean business, and they are quite ruthless. Remember, they murdered a number of politicians that had values more like the ones that are predominant in this room. So skipping all the rest of the complications, I want to put it in this clear polarity. The choice is one, the battle is over values. And one set of those values are for the enlightened, humane society or civilization that can, get along with the rest of the world and solve problems like global warming and economic injustice, the enlightened society. And you all work for that in a variety of ways. And the alternative is the fascist police state. And probably you all have thought often about parallels between what's going on in the United States today and Weimar Germany and the pre-Nazi period. It's so parallel, it's just driving scholars nuts. Remember, a lot of Germany was asleep while that was going on. So your work is very precious. I thank you all for doing what you do and coming to help Coleen or any of these other things, and I will shut up now.
Come on up, Diane. And we'll try to keep it to a couple 3 minutes just so we can try to get more people before we have to.
Okay. WHAM was very nice to put a contribution of mine to their blog up today, but all of you probably won't be able to read that. And I found this one paragraph by Winston Churchill so important to this debate, so I'm going to read it. The power of the executive to cast a man into prison, and we would say now women also, without formulating any charge known to the law, and particularly to deny him the judgment of his peers, is in the highest degree odious and the foundation of all totalitarian government, whether Nazi or communist. So this is what we're seeing happen to us. And it isn't that we're asleep so much in the U.S. I mean, this was sprung on us. I mean, I've been very busy with weatherizing my home and getting ready for Christmas and wanting to write a Christmas letter or whatever. And this was a big burden on me that just came out of, this crisis mode of the NDAA. And I just wanted to add here, I'm going to borrow something from the healthcare debate. We heard from our friends on the right saying that, this healthcare thing is going to be a government takeover of healthcare. Remember that? But I think we're seeing here a corporate takeover of government that is happening right as we speak. And it's kind of autocracy versus democracy that's going on. And I do see very much a corporate agenda. And this happened under Mussolini in Italy, right? That he replaced and this gets into the move to amend thing. I mean, Mussolini replaced the citizen legislators with corporations. I mean, they were literally the ones representing the people, corporations were. And we're seeing this movement here. And so I kind of see this behind the scenes, and I do think part of this is cheap labor. I mean, to have these detention camps with detainees there forever, whether they're illegal immigrants or Occupy people, homeless, infringers of this or that. I mean, it can be any number of groups that can find themselves in one of these detention camps. And what a night! Now they're burdened with, in prison, they still have to maybe pay 33 cents an hour to prisoners, right? And this is going to be free forever. I mean, war without end. I used to, in my church, I'd always hear the pastor saying, world without end as far as God, and now we're hearing war without end. So there's been such a switch in our values. And maybe some of you saw the film Schindler's List, and this is what happened in Nazi Germany. You had the Nazi concentration camps. It was just free labor. And Schindler's List, they showed, the women would try to look like a good worker, like they were going to pay, because you'd come up to that commandant, and you were either turning left or right. If you looked like you could serve the machine, you were saved, and the women would try to pinch their cheeks so they'd look robust and maybe be able to, be of worth until they wear out, and then you'd throw them in a ditch. I mean, this is down the road unless we mobilize as a people. And I did call Franken's office today and said, I'm from St. Louis Park, where you grew up, And I said, we're proud of our large Jewish citizenry in this suburb, and your people suffered this under, the bad guy. I'm not going to say his name because it's now not PC to say his name anymore, but why aren't, you've got to veto this, I said, you're a wrestler. You're a strong person, and we wanted your strength to combat this kind of thing. I mean, I could go on, but we have to combat this. Oh, and just one last thing. In today's paper, and there's, I know it's kind of scary, but Israel is now going to have new enforcement tools. And so they're forgetting, it depends on, what situation you're in, how you can kind of change your tune, but it says that now radical Israelis are going to be treated the same way as suspected Palestinians, detained for long periods without charge and tried in military courts. So that was today. So it's like various nations of the world are thinking, hey, this sounds like a good deal, what the United States is doing.
Thank you so much. I'm just, okay, yes, you're next. And then, Susan, you're after that. I just want to say, one of the answers here is speaking out. And we're quickly doing this. We have a few more minutes, right? But we're going to speak out because there's a large consensus. I don't know what it would be. It's more than 70%. The Tea Parties, by the way, spoke out against this law. We get so polarized into thinking our group is better than that group and stuff. This actually now, in the United States, the people who believe democracy, we all have cultural biases. We're all kind of in this mode that we believed that democracy over this military empire. So if one of the ways that we can try to combat this is to get more people. And so if we get more people and we speak out, we get out of I know we're in a church basement tonight. If we get out of our church basements and get into more, groups that are mixed, business groups, Kiwanis, all of the other groups. But let's do more speak out.
Although I don't look good in orange, I believe in free speech. This is really mind-boggling. This is a coup, but I don't understand by whom or for what. People have different, perspectives. But we know that we have a very corrupt economic and political system. And personally, I cannot separate the two. We know that the executive branch is owned by the financial industry. Congress is owned by corporate interest. And our justice system is a mockery. We have a court system. And we know that today is the 220th anniversary of our Bill of Rights that will be shredded when Obama, Bush, Cheney, these despicable people signed this into law. So what are we going to do about it? It's just like it's our responsibility. We do not have a democracy. We do not value human rights. So, folks, this is our last chance. This is the last coffin in the nail. Are we going to be here and do nothing? Are we going to be passive and say, oh, well, I'm a good person. They're not going to come after me. But, folks, I got a surprise for you. We're all in this together, and we're all going to be victims of this unless we do something.
Well, I'd probably just reiterate what everyone else has said. It's a day of mourning for all of us in this country, even for those that don't realize what has happened. And I would like to second Joyce's and Coleen's statement that we need to get out there and get more visible, more active. And now is the time because people are ready. They're finally ready to join us. And the youth are there first. So let's reach out to everyone. And we have some actions because Guantanamo may be our next stop. So let's get out there and let the world know that we want it closed. And on the issue of torture, this is by tackling torture at the top. We have a bunch of people are going to go, hopefully, to Washington, D.C., and many groups are supporting it. Amnesty International, Center for Victims of Torture, War is a Crime, and probably Coleen can remember other groups I'm forgetting. but to ring the White House, and we're going to try and take a bus. If we can't take a bus, we'll take a van and join others. We really need to get out there. I mean, this makes this so real. This isn't just the Muslims or the people they describe as terrorists. This is us. And of course, 2 Muslim women or Somalian women have already been hauled off to who knows where for simply sending some money to some people to help them out. $8,000, I think it was. And we didn't really know too much about it, and when it happened, a few people spoke up, but not too many. And I fear many people in this country are going, oh, don't worry, it's just the terrorists they're going to get. No worries. So we have to let them know this is not the case. It could be anybody. So please join us for a rally and march on January 9th at St. Thomas, first starting at the plaza, because Delahunty, who was a professor at St. Thomas Law School, was one of the original writers of the memo allowing for torture. Torture is still going on all around the world at the behest of the United States of America and our president. We are still capturing and detaining people in secret sites and torturing them. Our CIA is helping directly, not just leaving it up to the bad guys of a certain government here or there. So I guess I should stop. But yes, torture is the U.S.
And if you're interested in going on January 11th, see Susan or I. We're trying to put this together real quickly and figure out the transportation. The January 9th, we have the time on there, but I think we settled at 10:45, 11. Meet at the plaza. We have plenty of orange jumpsuits. And then there's a movie that Amnesty International is showing on the evening of the 11th. The timeline, if you think back a decade ago, 10 years ago, on January 9th, that's when this memo was written by you and Delahunty saying the Geneva Conventions no longer were a worry. With respect to non-state actors, we don't have to worry. 2 days later is when Guantanamo was opened. So there's a direct connection there. All right, Steph. And then Mike, and then Chuck, okay? And then we got 4 more, and then okay, if we can get 5 more real quick, is that going to be two couple minutes?
All right, I'm Steph York. I'm one of the 23 subpoenaed anti-war activists from here in the Twin Cities. And I want to invite people to stay tonight at 7 o'clock. The Committee to Stop FBI Repression is doing an event right here in this room talking, and we're going to be, Jess Sundin from the Anti-War Committee is going to be speaking. Carlos Montes is going to be speaking via Skype from Los Angeles. His home, he came here for the RNC and helped organize the RNC protests in 2008. His home was busted into at 5 a.m. by a SWAT team based on the FBI telling the LA sheriffs that he had anti-government ideas. So they, executed a dangerous guns-drawn raid because he has, as a 60-some-year-old man with anti-government ideas. I know there's none of those in this room. And then the other speaker via Skype will be Nora Lashi, who is the daughter of Ghassan Lashi, one of the Holy Land Foundation defendants. And in the Holy Land case, they were convicted of material support for foreign terrorist organizations, specifically Hamas, for giving humanitarian aid for orphanages and schools in Gaza, the same orphanages and schools that the UN committees were giving humanitarian support for. And so go figure, they thought they could. But he's serving 65 years in the Guantanamo of Illinois in Marion, Communication Management Unit in Marion, Illinois. So please stay for that event. I think that it's an important part of this conversation that we're having today on indefinite detention, which is obviously an outrage. And, we're making a lot of jokes among the 23 subpoenaed about, if we disappear, you should look for us. I have 2 other things I wanted to say was that, I was glad to hear that Franken changed his mind. I spoke to his office this morning, and he was voting yes, and he heard us and decided to vote no. And I think that Klobuchar is a coward because I called her office this morning, and they said that she was undecided. She refused to give out her views on the topic. And and then she obviously voted yes. So those are those points. And then I don't know if Teresa has time. I would like to be armed, mentally armed, with there's this debate that says, oh, the Feinstein language makes this not apply to U.S. citizens. So I would like some more specific information about to be able to explain to people how it does. But
Let's have Mike next, and then you can jump in between.
A lot of you guys here already know me. I'm Michael Kavlin. And there is only one party in this country, and it's called the money party. And we need to start getting honest about that. And I can tell you guys and I'm going to make this very, very quick. I don't have a whole lot to say on this because a lot of you already know where I stand on this whole thing and all that. It's right here. I'm running for the U.S. Senate against Amy Klobuchar, and it's that simple. And I'm very proud to do that. And quite frankly, and I'm going to be very honest with you all, I will do it with or without the help and support of the peace community in this state. I'm starting to get in contact with people all over the state who want to help this campaign. People that have been completely disengaged from the political process. And I'll end with this. I'm very proud to be one of the national and regional coordinators for the Rocky Anderson for President campaign. Thank you.
What she thinks the courts are likely, but they won't record it. Well, that's okay. She can sure.
Sure. Well, and to answer your question, my understanding of the Feinstein language is that really all that it does is it exempts this mandatory military detention when we're talking about American citizens on U.S. soil. So it says, well, you can do military detention or ordinary criminal justice, criminal trials, but it still includes the ability to have military detention. It's just that it's not mandatory when it comes to things that happen in this country when it comes to American citizens. That would be the FBI or the president.
And there was a clear vote. When the people were asking the same question, Feinstein said, let's vote, and it came out 55-45. 55 in favor of Lindsey Graham gave his talk, Carl Levin. So there was a clear vote, and they voted in favor of detention of American citizens.
Yep.
Klobuchar was one of those, and again, Franken was not. There was a difference on that one vote.
Mm-hmm. And then to answer Chuck's question, I honestly don't know. I guess I'm hopeful that the courts will say that mandatory military detention of Americans on U.S. soil, or that military detention of Americans on U.S. soil violates the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment. We haven't gotten a lot of really great decisions out of the U.S. Supreme Court when it comes to Guantanamo. So I really don't know. I could see a situation where they say this is different. This is war, and if the war is being fought on American soil, then the laws of war apply, not the Constitution. So I'm not real hopeful. A couple other questions, or speak up? Oh.
Any more questions for Teresa real quick while she's up there?
I always thought there was a victory for civil courts, civilian courts rather than but apparently the people who are promoting this latest legislation are using that decision by the Supreme Court to work in their favor.
I'm trying to remember. I mean, there's two questions. One is, do the civilian courts have jurisdiction to hear habeas petitions? The second question, though, is, do they have are they going to apply the Fifth Amendment? Are they going to apply the Sixth Amendment to these individuals? So the questions before the court in the past have been whether or not somebody who's captured in Afghanistan, for example, held in Guantanamo, can even use the American courts to challenge the conditions of their detention. But what rules apply, if you've got somebody who's in state prison at the Minnesota Correctional Facility at Stillwater, they can file a habeas petition. They're in the United States. They can file a habeas petition and argue that their detention violates the Constitution. Well, habeas is a little bit broader than that. I mean, so the questions before the court have primarily been, do people at Guantanamo have the ability to even ask a court to review their detention? And so this would be a question of whether or not the court is willing to apply the Sixth Amendment to that detention or some other, the military tribunal, the Military Commissions Act. So. The Padilla case. You know what? I got to tell you, I haven't read them in a while, so I'm going to have to say I would need to do some review of them.
And these are the scholars, it's murky right now, and that's why Feinstein asked that question about citizenry. There are arguments on both sides, and so the law itself, the Supreme Court case law, can be argued both ways. That's the problem. We got to get one person that I said to be because they're going to set up for the next Skype interviews. So just tell us.
My name is Lynn Mayo, and I was one of the original three who, along with Diane and thank you, who just left, who started the Tackling Torture at the Top. And I noticed that this has been an extremely wearing year and last few months, with Bradley Manning having been put into prison for how many months was it and essentially tortured in isolation and humiliation. And then we had the XL pipeline, which almost went through and was vetoed, but now it looks like it's come up again. Next we had the saber rattling around Iran, after we've left Iraq, but are leaving 15,000 people there, mostly contractors. And then there were the collapse of the global warming troughs at Duban in Africa, where we've regressed rather than moved forward. Next, we find out drones are being used on our own soil. And now there's an attempt to censor the internet and to shut down any kind of monetary exchange between between people in this country and Somalia. One of the local banks is saying they will no longer make those transfers. So it can be stressful. And something did come through the internet the other day that was very helpful for me after I talked to Franken's office. And at that time, Franken's office was saying he voted for, and he did make one vote for it that I'm aware of, the National Defense Authorization Act, and she said he's doing it for the troops. And I was so upset I had to go lie down. And then this came up through the internet. Let me suggest to everyone, this is from Jean, let me suggest that getting excited and fearful is not one bit helpful. You will feed the flames of fearful energy that will then simply multiply. I see this bill as just one more addition to Armageddon, a scenario that I believe is now developing. It may be only the beginning of such news. If we cannot control our emotions now, what are we going to do as we move further and further into an ever-deepening crisis? So that helped me to calm myself down. And to notice, one thing is that Franken did change his vote, which is incredible. I got a call today from a friend of mine in New York who said, I could not get through on the lines to you, Lynn, the telephone lines. This is the first time this has ever happened to me. I couldn't get through to you on telephone. And I thought, oh, that's all those Minnesotans calling Franken's office and telling him not to vote for this bill. So I do want to remind people, though, that there have been several accomplishments that we have made by speaking out. The XL pipeline is the most recent one that I'm aware of, but we also got rid of that terrible woman who was heading up the No Child Left Behind educational thing, and there have been a number of the thing with Bradley Manning finally got humane treatment, and I think that came because we were willing to protest. So I'm saying, let's keep at it, you guys. I think we're doing an incredible job. And my last, and what I would like for us to focus on to some extent is the newspapers. Do you know, the Star and Tribune has not yet, to my knowledge, mentioned this issue. And I've checked every day. I check my newspaper every day and I look online every day. There has been up to today, and unless they put something in the newspaper today, no mention of this cancellation of our rights, which I find absolutely astounding. I think that we do need to direct some of our efforts towards having the Star and Tribune and our other local media address issues that are of such momentous concern to American citizens who, of course, can't be doing anything about it if they don't know anything about it. Thank you.